Today's going to be a little bit different. I wanted to talk about my guitar teacher, my main jazz guitar teacher, Paul Wingo. One of my two main jazz guitar teachers, my other being Rick Whitehead. But Paul was my first, and he got me ready for conservatory. And he passed on recently, and I was very shocked to hear about it. So I just wanted to do something, and I didn't know what to do. So I'm making a video. Thought I'd tell some stories. One of my first times I went in to see him, I was coming from a rock background, and I was very concerned about technique, and I asked him about picking technique. What's a good picking technique to use? And he said, okay, I have an exercise for you. He said, take a piece of paper and put it over your strings and trace the lines of the strings. So there's 6 lines on the piece of paper. And with the pencil in your hand and your pick, write your name. So I was doing this, very awkward. There was trying not to poke holes in the paper, and I had this pencil and holding the guitar and paper, and I signed my name. And he says, just like you sign your name differently from everyone else, so your picking technique is just a unique thing. And that's when I knew my teacher was crazy. I think the main thing I learned about Paul was from Paul was that life is crazy, and you have to embrace the crazy. One time I came down to a lesson, and there were these 2 giant spiders. One was chasing each other across the ceiling, and they were big, and I was kind of startled. And he said, springtime. He took me on field trips. One time he took me on a field trip to learn about practical gigging. And he says, well, when you gig, you may have 2 gigs in a day. You may have your dinner gig, 8 o'clock, kind of professional gig. And then you're going to have your nighttime gig, your bar gig. That starts at 10 o'clock, goes till 2 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes you don't have time to go home and change, so you have to learn how to change while you're driving. And I thought he was kidding. But then on this field trip, I stayed over the night with him. I went to 2 gigs with his, and had a lesson in the morning, the next morning, stayed over the night. So we went out in the evening, and he went to his first gig, which was like a professional thing, kind of background music at some, I don't know, museum or something. And then on the way to Bertha's, he changed in the car while driving. I'm like, you need a hand with that? And he's like, nope. Out of a tuxedo and a stick shift while driving. He says you got to learn how to do that. That's a musician for you. You kind of got to adapt the world to your own needs, because not everything is going to fit. But I think that's true for everyone too. And as soon as you learn that life is crazy, and you have to embrace the crazy. In one of my first lessons, I didn't realize, because he was so nice and polite and everything, that he was actually being very tough on me. He was throwing me extremely difficult work right off the bat. So it was like the 3rd or 4th lesson, and he was giving me I had to do chord solos. I'd never done anything like that before, with these complex harmonies, do solo jazz guitar chord solos and some other analysis stuff, and he's just throwing everything at me at once. I didn't know the chords very well, and I was kind of baffled. I wasn't used to this being challenged in this way, and I had an attitude, and he knew I had an attitude. And one of the 3rd or 4th lessons, I was just left in a bad mood, and I didn't even say goodbye. And that week I realized, okay, he's trying to help me. I know he's good, and I know what I have to do, and I know this is just silliness, and I got to do something. So I took some of the tapes he had given me, which Joe Pass. He gave me the Joe Pass Virtuoso series, and I've been told Joe Pass was one of the greatest, so I believe that. So I just was listening to the tape, seeing if there's something I could grasp on there. And I learned night and day. his version of Night and Day. I think it's on Virtuoso too. And I stayed up for hours and hours and hours, basically copying the solo, and then I sort of learned like a few things that sounded good that were based on it, a little improv here and there and chords. And I was ready. I came into the lesson, and he sort of looks at me like this, and he goes, "All right, what are we going to do today?" Kind of sarcastically. And I just looked at him and took my guitar out, and I started playing this thing from Joe Pass and my own improv. I went into this for several minutes, and he hadn't heard me play a lick of anything since I'd started with him. And I'm playing Joe Pass solo guitar, and about 3 or 4 minutes into it, I just stopped and looked at him. I go, "You want me to keep going?" And he looks at me and he goes, "You asshole." After that, we were friends. And I used to come and spend hours at his house. He's very generous with his time. I paid for an hour of guitar lesson, but I got a lot more than that. And then I got to talk to Andrea about the Redskins. She's like still one of the biggest football experts I'd ever met. It was good times. So I want to play a song that he arranged. It was one of the first things I learned. It was a Beatles song. He knew I was into the Beatles, so he wanted to give me something I could appreciate. And it's fairly simple, but very beautiful, and I think it'd be appropriate to play in memory of him. I never recorded it or performed it live. It's called, of course, Yesterday, which now I'm thinking a lot about. This chord, the F major 7 with the 3rd and the 7th on top, the stretch. And I hadn't played chords like that before in rock. And I'm like, "You can't do that." And he's like, "Man up, you can do that." So I manned up.